Shakochem. First of all, I want to wish Chaim Arukim to Paul and Bobby. They have the 8th Yortzeit of their father, Shlomo ben Moshe. I think he would have been pretty much amazed, don't you think, to see the two of you standing up here and leading the davening? Shocked. Proud and shocked. And also to Jonathan Pavlovsky, who is giving his mother double honor because he said Kaddish for her in Adar Rishon, and he's now saying Kaddish for her again in Adar Sheni. Just as a point of interest, if a person passes away in Adar and it's not a leap year, if it's a leap year, of course, then you go and it's Adar Rishon, then it would be definitely Adar Rishon. But what about a person who passes away in Adar and you then come, as we did this year, to a leap year? So do you then observe in the first Adar and the second Adar? Well, guess what? There are different opinions. Some say the first, and some say the second, and some say both. Okay, which is what Jonathan does because he's machmir. He wants to be stringent in matters of honor of parents. I checked with the Latin Synagogue. I asked Diane Binstock about because on our K2 on our database where you put in the Yortzeits, it automatically comes up in the first Adar. So I checked on that because one of our congregants, as a Sfardiya, said, no, her sister in Israel said, it's a mistake, it's got to be Adar Sheni. So I checked with the Beth Din, and they said, no, the psak of London Beth Din is to go with Adar Rishon. So if you have a Yortzeit, it's always been Adar Rishon, but if you wanted to say Kaddish in the second Adar, as Jonathan is doing over here, that's absolutely fine as well, because after all, you're just helping the soul of the person to ascend even higher. So first of all, we need to sing Shir HaMalot, Psalm 121, on page, this is for, of course, this is for Ukraine, page 510, Shir HaMalot. Esa enai el harim ma'yin
Al Yanun Shomrecha Hine lo Yanun velo Ishan Shomer Israel Adonai Shomerecha Adonai Tzilcha Al Yad Yeminecha Yomam HaShemesh lo Yakeka וירח בלילה, אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, אדוני ישמור צאתך בואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אחינו כל בית ישראל הנתונים בצרה ובשפייה, העומדים במו יבשה מקום ירחם עליכם, ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, מאפלה לאורה, משיבות לגאולה, שנה בגלה בזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן.
So the lady who's that lady at the back over there, she's visited us before. You know, some people just have so much tzarot in their lives. She's two of her sons both have thyroid cancer. Photos of them lying in hospital. She herself has also had severe illnesses, etc. And of course, all the medications. You don't always get complete support from the Kupat Cholim in Israel. And so she is just a person who needs our help. By the way, on the subject of tzarot, you know that they started a Jurassic Park in Israel. Yes. And they filled it with Dinosaurus and Minosaurus. Okay. Mishnah 9. We introduced Rabbi Yaakov yesterday, and this is what he teaches. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Hamahalech b'derech v'shoneh. A person is going along the way, he's traveling on the road, and he's shoneh, he's learning, he's reviewing his Torah lessons. Umafsik the Mishnah soy, and then he breaks off from his study, Omer, and he says, my goodness me, ma na'eh ilan zeh, how beautiful is this tree. Ma na'eh nirze. Look at this beautiful field over here. Ma ala alav hakatuv. The verse scripture regards him ki'ilu mitchayev benafsho, as if he was guilty to pay with his life. Now, this is completely and totally ununderstandable, isn't it? A man is walking along. He sees a beautiful sight. He wants to wonder at nature. He stops his learning for a moment to admire the Almighty's handiwork. And he's in chayev mitah. It's as if, ki'ilu, it's as if he is guilty for his life. So one needs to try and understand this mission over here. So I'll give you two explanations. The first one is a little bit weak, but that's the way it's put over here. That the hazards of travel, you know that when a person is traveling, a person is more exposed, etc. Therefore, you need extra protection, and therefore you need the protection of Torah when you're traveling and you don't break off from that. And of course, there's a famous story about King David, who was foretold, he had prescience, he had a vision that he would pass away on a Shabbat. Now, the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, can't take you while you're learning Torah. Okay, that's a good recipe for staying alive for a long time. And he reckoned that he would study the Torah all the time on Shabbat, and therefore it just couldn't happen to him. He wouldn't die on Shabbat. So he studied and studied and studied, and one day he was immersed, while he's immersed in his Torah study, it's a story in the Talmud, he heard a rustling in the trees in the garden. And he was filled with curiosity and wonder to see what this strange noise was. And for a brief moment, he stopped studying, and in that very brief moment he was vulnerable, and the protection of Torah was removed from him, and in a fraction of a moment, because that's, all the Malach HaMavet needs, just needs one moment. Okay? And he jumps in, and the piece of, he stood on something, a step, and it broke under him, and he fell over, and he expired. That's the story about David HaMelech. So that's the one explanation. I'll give you another explanation, very briefly. I want to tell you about Johannesburg and Cape Town. Both cities had very little Torah learning and very little Judaism until somewhere in the region of the late 1960s, when Johannesburg began to take off. It was just amazing. A Chabad Shliach came in at the same time. A Kollel was started from another organization, and within the space of a decade, Johannesburg had become an incredibly, vibrant Torah city, as it is still to this very day. Institutions, organizations, learning going on all over. At the same time, a very competent shaliach, a cousin of the shaliach who went to Johannesburg, went to Cape Town. And nothing happened there. They just couldn't get it going. And to this very day, Cape Town has lagged behind Johannesburg in terms of its centers of learning, its energy, its Torah, its engagement, etc., its restaurants and everything else. What's the reason? And I figured it out a long time ago. In Johannesburg, there's no great natural beauty. It's a very materialistic city. There was a hunger for something more spiritual, hunger to connect with something on a different level. Cape Town is different. I have been in airplanes coming and flying into Cape Town. I've had a Capetonian sitting next to me, weeping when she saw her city and the mountains and the sea. Because in Cape Town, you had spirituality. You had the spirituality of nature. Awesome, beautiful, incredible. I think that's what lies underneath this particular mission over here. Sometimes nature can actually be an obfuscation, can hide your devotion to God, because it creates its own sense of wonder and of spirituality. And what Rabbi Yaakov is saying over here is that if a person is walking along and he sees nature not as something which is the extension and the connection of his learning, he's not seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the nature. He's not seeing that nature is HaKadosh Baruch Hu acting in this world. But he sees nature as an entity in its own. He says, how beautiful this is. This is the aesthetic sense that I have of the world. He's missed the point, hasn't he? He's failed to make that connection. He hasn't understood that the one is just the clothes of the other. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu enclosed in this world. And because he has set it up as an entity in its own right, and he's seen it as an aesthetic beauty, as opposed to an extension of his spiritual connectedness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's why Rabbi Yaakov says he's as if he's chayav mitah, because he's failed to understand the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present in the world. His Judaism is connected with his learning. It's something which is abstract. It's something which is up over there. But real life, the world in which he lives, is Mr. Connectedness. And that's the problem. That's where I think this Mishnah should really be read.